right now we're looking inside a plan to hand Ruto blank check for more borrowing. The debt ceiling by MPs in 2023 was at 55% of the GDP, and the CBK data shows that public debt stood at around 10.6 trillion as of June 2024 compared to 10.3 trillion recorded in June 2023.
That's right. Now, as it stands, our debt to GDP ratio is about 70%, which is terrible. And yes, the MPs had planned to cap that at 55% of the GDP. But there's now a proposal being fronted by Kimani Ichung'wah to remove the debt limit. So the Public Finance Management Act 2012 currently limits Kenya's borrowing capacity, but a new proposal to amend a section of this act allows the government to exceed the current debt limit, which stands at 55% of the GDP. It includes the removal of specific debt ceilings, instead allowing borrowing based on a percentage of the GDP or other specified parameters. Now, the rationale of this is that the current debt ceiling restricts the ability of the government to finance its development projects, and the new borrowing plan would allow more flexibility, especially as the government claims it will prioritize economic growth and spending cuts to manage debt sustainably. I'm sorry, that's laughable for any Kenyan who understands what our tax money is actually used for. It is not to fund development projects, certainly.
I'm just going to say it as it is. Cut! I'm sorry, I have to say it like that. Simply because we've not seen any form of development that affects Mwananchi directly. In case you haven't been noticing, there's a lot of bill discussions across the nation, and all these bills tie on to taxation. Just yesterday, CS wa Treasury alikuwa anaongelelea about how taxing us would actually benefit us. But the only problem is I've not seen any direct development, especially within the counties, that could affect our economic growth directly. And it just seems that this development is happening for the MPs.
I mean,
at least from their perspective,
a good chunk of our tax revenue does go to repaying debt, the debt that we're now trying to get more of, as if we're not deep enough in the hole already. Another good chunk of it goes towards corruption, and whatever I think scraps are left are what is now given to development projects. I don't know, funding, even government recurrent expenditure and the rest. Now I think that's the honest, realistic output, and from looking at the situation, regardless of what is said when people go into parliament or when they're asking for money. Now, economists and MPs have warned that unrestricted borrowing could lead to unsustainable debt levels. I think we're already at the unsustainable debt levels.
True.
But now with a blank check to borrow as much without capping it at 55% of the GDP, who knows what could happen. The new amendment, if passed, would relax borrowing constraints, giving more discretion to Treasury. And critics argue that the stability of Kenya's economy is in danger. And of course, a shift in the government strategy from fiscal consolidation to growth-driven borrowing is now being seen to happen. Hashtag is morning fix. Tuambie. Yeah, without a debt ceiling. Imagine you just go to the bank and they just
give you any amount of money.
Of course, there will still be conditions and lenders will still look at the ability to repay, etc. But to have, even in your personal finances, to have debt that you're repaying that is more than what you're bringing in, or could be 80-90% of what you're collecting every month, is just ridiculous.
And if this is our money, Mariam, every time we borrow from these countries, we need to be given, okay, this is the amount of money that we borrowed from China, this is the amount of money you borrow from IMF, the US has given us this amount of money, this is our plan. I believe that's how nations should be run, in that we don't borrow. We only are involved when it comes to paying, but we're not involved when it comes to
the borrowing.
And even not even the borrowing. They talk about this borrowing growth. And it just means one thing, that when it comes to borrowing, we are not told about the amount in cash, and of course, you're not told where the money is going. What level of development is it going to actually help us achieve, and in how long? Those are supposed to be promises, and not even promises. They are our employees, but sijaona employee mwenye anakuja anaambia employer wake atulingisha tu do mob. Do ilikuwa mob. Do na ilikuwa sawa. Profit none. Growth hakuna.
Nothing to see.